Perfect. So I'd like to call the Finance Committee for today. I guess it's actually December 1st, but the meeting is our regular scheduled November meeting, correct?
Correct.
So I'd like to call that to order. And is there any changes to the agenda by anybody other than the ones we have just requested that we can move item 3 and item 4, the capital expenditure request and earth system change up before we start that? So with those changes, are the approval of the agenda and the minutes okay, or does anybody see any changes?
Looks good, Catherine, other than those changes that you're doing.
Okay. So Jean moves to accept the minutes and the agenda as read, unless I have to do it two separately. Can I second that?
You don't need a motion, just as long as nobody objects, it's fine.
All right. And so number D, this is item D, the place for public comment. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the committee on any matter not on this agenda. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the committee at a later meeting. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Is there anybody here in the public that would like to speak or make a presentation?
Yes, I would. Jim Dietzel. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
One, I like the building and planning meeting. I haven't watched the whole video yet, but I did appreciate that the code changes were being addressed. I did have a question about, the law that governs healthcare districts, and I doubt that Scott is there. One of the things that it says is employees serve at the pleasure of the board of directors. Can anybody tell me what that really means?
Yeah, the board of directors is the boss. We can fire anybody there. And sometimes we should and we don't. But as far as I know, that puts the board, who got fired, the board got fired because they didn't do what they were supposed to. When, Mark, when was that? About 13, 12, when was that? They walked in and marched them out of there.
I don't remember. I was a night shifter.
Oh, okay. Well, when Bob Bivey was the president, they made some bad moves, and not that he did, because he was an awesome president. However, that's how we ended up with Chet Beadle. And but the board got escorted out and redone. So we're the last stop.
Got it. So it's not like go get me coffee. It's, your job depends on what we say, basically, as the board.
No, but we're responsible to make sure things are running right, or that we can be fired.
Very good. Now, I have requested before that video comments be turned on YouTube videos. And a lot of that is just for time stamping the video. If people don't have time to watch a 2-hour meeting, then I could put times of what happens when on the video. And really that just means not setting it for children, setting it for adults. Is it possible to do that?
I'd have to look into that, Jim. I'm not exactly sure what the capabilities there to record the comments being made during a live stream are.
Well, it's not really it's for comments underneath the video. So I could put at let's say,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, this happened. And it's just, I've done it before. It's basically, you don't set it for kids, you set it for grownups, and then it turns the comments on.
We'd have to talk about that. I know it was a while ago that we decided to leave the comments off just because there's really no control for what is said there. I mean, any person can get on and say whatever they want, which can kind of lead to some vulgar things being said, whether they're caring about what the board's discussing or not. And so it kind of just gives us a little bit more control to keep it a friendly thing to see on YouTube.
Right. I mean, I've never seen a vulgar comment when you did have them on. So just if there's
just
an
opens
instance
us
of
up to something
vulgar
like that.
comments, I'd sure like to see it. Also, one last thing, because I know you got a meeting to do. It was a while back, I think you voted to purchase equipment for doing mammograms. Is that correct?
I don't think, not that I remember purchasing equipment for mammograms.
I think it was before you were on the board, Catherine. I'm
Okay.
thinking it was a couple of years ago, and I could look back at the minutes. Do you remember that, Mark?
Yeah, no, we voted to keep that in the strategic plan, but I don't think there was ever any research done to find out what units we would be using, or if it was going to be a mobile, that we were still doing some preliminary studies on it, but I don't know that we ever got any equipment quotes or anything like that.
Right. So how many women are there living in Kern River Valley? Do we know?
Not enough. Just kidding.
10,000 maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. But
Okay,
Jim, thank you for your participation, but our 3 minutes are up.
Thank you for the 3 minutes and have a great meeting.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Okay, on to item E, which are the financial statements for October 2021, the monthly finance report, which includes the unaudited financial report and the vendor aging report. So who wants to go first? Dave, you're gonna go
Yeah.
first?
Catherine, I thought we
Yes.
moved it to where we were gonna let those two guys,
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
I'm sorry, but
Jim threw me off. It's okay. It's right here on my notes. So, which I'm not looking at. So Carrie, do you want to go now for the capital expenditure request,
Sure.
please?
So I am requesting that we go with the True Bridge proposal, which is a total of $12,600. So this is something that we've been doing for the last year. It's been really beneficial. It's given us some insight as to some vulnerabilities that come up within our systems. New vulnerabilities are discovered all the time. People try to exploit those vulnerabilities. And so this gives us some oversight to be able to patch those and correct those before any real risk occurs to the hospital. And so what this does is there are two aspects to it. There's vulnerability scanning, which is a quarterly scan done by a system. And then there is the actual annual penetration test, which is a team of individuals who attempt to exploit our systems and then provide a report on if they were able to do so. So I recommend the TrueBridge one. The SecureWorks one is roughly double the cost for pretty much the same thing. We get a on-demand vulnerability scanning with the SecureWorks, but in my opinion, that's not really necessary. Quarterly scanning is more than adequate. Gives us time to correct any issues that come up, and then wait for the next quarter to see what that report brings us.
And so
who did we
you-
use I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Gene.
who did we use last year?
TrueBridge. I want to also add that this is a recommendation. We do an annual risk assessment. Having penetration and vulnerability scanning in place is a recommendation there to make sure that we're secure and protecting all of our patient data as well.
I would like to see it go to consent, Catherine. and-
Okay. And it's not really like a new contract, right? It's just continuing on?
It really is a new contract because of our previous one was a one-year thing. So this is
Okay,
again a one-year thing. It's not listed as a renewal, even though the service is renewing.
okay. And so Heidi, you'll put that on the consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks, Carrie. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, unless there's any questions on it.
I do not have any questions.
Okay.
Jean?
No, I remembered it from last year, believe it or not. And it looks like it worked and he looks happy with it.
I am.
Okay, well, that's important. All right, thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Okay, for the Earth Systems change order number 2, Bob?
Okay, so Earth Systems is the company that did the soils report for the master project. They've been doing work for the hospital for many years. They did the soils work back when the buildings were built in the late 80s, early 90s. And so anyway, for the master project, we had them do the soils report for the 2016 building code. And then we also had them do the change order number 1, which was approved a while back, was for when we were doing the emergency generator project. We're actually building a small building on the backside of the hospital to house equipment. So we had them update the soils report reflecting that on this project. This proposal, change order number 2, is being driven because of OSHPD HCAI's requirement that we submit under the 2019 code versus the 2016 code. So this is to go back through the soils report and revise it so that it meets and spells out that the soils, all this data is good for the 2019 code. We can't submit a soils report that's only referencing the 16 code when we submit first part of next year.
So is that more work that you're just gonna be, the change order is you're gonna go back and reword the information, or are we having to do more soil tests?
There will not be any physical more soils tests according to this submittal.
Okay,
They can use the borings that we did last year.
okay,
But this is to go back through and reword the document, verify that all of it is in compliance with the latest set of plans that are going to be submitted. I have sent them the drawings, and then this is the proposal for them to review the drawings, bring the soils report up to the 2019 specifications that's required by OSHPD HCAI.
It sounds like it needs to be done now as soon as possible, and it don't sound like there's a lot of choices.
No,
Yeah.
there really is not.
Okay.
I
Can we
agree.
move it to consent? Catherine?
yes, we can move it to consent. Heidi, please.
What's the cost? Is it that 6375 right there?
Yes, it's the 6375
Total.
Thank you.
total. Yes.
I could probably rewrite it for less.
And if you had the right initials after your name, I would gladly have you do it.
Well, okay, I'll put that in my things to do.
Yeah, I don't have the right initials after my name either.
Well, can you work on that also?
I probably could, yes.
Okay, in your spare time though.
Yep.
Okay. So any questions for Bob other than what we already asked? And it's gone to consent. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, back to E. Now I can go out back in order again. Financial statements. The unaudited financial statements. Dave?
Thank you, Catherine. So before I go into the numbers, I thought it'd be appropriate to give you an operational update on all the events that have occurred over the last several weeks, most of them positive. We did succeed in getting approval for the phase 4 COVID application. They told us we were approved. However, they didn't tell us how much yet. They said they were going to be sending us the money in December. So we should find out shortly. I'm hoping it's close to a 7-figure amount, similar to some of the other COVID checks that we've gotten in the past, but I have really no way of knowing. We've checked with other CFOs and other, and the formula is just kind of mysterious right now, and we're just assuming that it'll be something similar to what we've gotten in the past, but we did get approved. That was the first step. And then the major one, which was due on November 30th, of phase one, which goes all the way back to the beginning of all the money they've sent us. We had to justify all that money in a very detailed report that took a lot of time. And thankfully, we got that submitted and got that tentatively approved, which pretty much states in the report we sent them that we deserve to keep all the $4.5 million that they sent us. In the absence of having good justification, we could have potentially had to pay back part or all of that money. So that was obviously my main priority over the last 30 days or so, was making sure that that report was done correctly and we didn't leave any money on the table to have to give back because we didn't show the right justifications. So Barbara, and there was very important help in that project, along with Wes Thu, who is a consultant we use from Whipfly, who does our cost report. And they provided a lot of the templates and the formulas that we used to put the best foot forward and to prove that we didn't have to give back any COVID money. So I wanted to update you on those two projects. Part of the reason I also wanted to think, go ahead.
I can ask you
Yeah.
on that. We get a whole lot more COVID or advanced money than 4.5 million.
Yeah, some of that other miscellaneous stuff is not necessarily subject to payback. So thankfully, it's mostly the federal money that we are having to go through extra hoops to prove that we're spending it on the right things and we don't have to pay it back. And that was the HHS money that has a whole program involved. There will be one last step to that report that we sent for November 30th. It's called a 10-month uniform guidelines review. Thankfully, the individual that's going to be doing that review is Rick Jackson, who I've been kept informed throughout the whole process of us submitting this data. So he's already fairly comfortable with how we've submitted it. So we should be in good shape when we have the 10-month uniform audit that comes up next year.
Okay, so we're addressing all of the advances that we got sent. So we know if we can keep it or not at this point.
We can tentatively, I'll have to ask Rick Jackson for sure, our auditor, whether or not I should start posting that money to the bottom line, but I would give you a general yes. Now keep in mind, there's 6 million that Medicare we have on the books on one line item. 1.5 million of that is just an advance that we are paying back, and that's not really COVID money. That they told us up front that was just a loan, and we will leave that on the books. But the other 6.5, the other part of that 6.5 million, we have a good chance of getting that all reduced off the liabilities and put in as a profit.
So there's no interest on that 1.5 million from what I understand.
Yeah, there was some miscellaneous interest income we earned because we stuck it in the bank and their interest-bearing accounts, but we had to submit those numbers as well in our report. And because the COVID losses were more than that, including interest, we won't have to pay any of that back.
Good. Thank you.
So, and then I also wanted to thank Bob Easterday for his update last week with the building and grounds, because I was normally intending to try to get some time to do my first swing at the seismic project and the $19 million to give the board my perspective as your new CFO of how I thought it looked, whether we were on time and on budget. And I think Bob did a good job updating you all at the building and grounds with all the detailed numbers coming from the architect and how it compared to each project and whether we were on track or not. I intend to still continue down that path that Bob is in to give you a lot more detail and a lot more big picture. What I enjoy doing is what I call strategic financial planning, where we look at a long-term scenario over the 7-year horizon, and we ask ourselves the question, can the organization afford this $19 million project without borrowing any money? That's obviously the question the board had to go through when you made that decision to move forward. I just want to feel as comfortable as everyone else did when you made that decision, because I'm your new CFO and I'm here to make it happen and make it work for all concerned. So I'm going through a lot of detail right now. I'm going through the way I build strategic plans is at the detail level. And so I go through 3 years of history every month, all the cash flow items. So we have a predictable model of what the cash flow is going to look like in the future by understanding what money gets spent in the past and then making adjustments for what changes we know are happening every year. So anyway, it's an exciting project and you're going to be getting a lot more from me on that, but just not today.
Dave, for the last 3 years, we've been almost the whole 3 years, we've been involved in COVID. That's not a good judge of the past.
Exactly. So I got to sort out all that history and get rid of all that stuff that isn't going to be reoccurring going
Okay.
forward.
Which-
And then asking the question, are we still positively cash flowing without all that extra money?
What about the one chunk of money that they just gave us, the PPP, 2.2 million?
Well,
Where
that's
is that in your trend?
that I got also similarly, I have to not consider that to be an ongoing item. That's a one-time event and that's all been forgiven. There isn't any more at risk there. But you're right. I mean, those are all examples of how we were able to build up our reserves, but isn't something that we can expect going forward, except for some IGT amounts that we seem to have some confidence in that will continue to go back to real strong levels over the next couple of years. And we'll continue to review the feasibility of those types of assumptions.
Cool, sounds good.
So let's
Thank
just
you.
go into the numbers. So I'm going to hit shared screen and I'm going to, you have to excuse me for a minute. I'm up where I guess we went right to where I wanted to go. Okay, can you see the screen?
We can.
Yes,
Okay, good. I have to move my screen over to make it so I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so what we jumped into is page 17, the statistics. And if you don't mind going forward, starting next month, I want to move this page up. It makes more sense to me that we talk about the statistics at the beginning of our report. So I'm probably going to make this page, which is late in the report, it
looks better that way.
I'm making it worse. And okay. I'm trying to make it smaller so I can see the numbers. And I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Okay, so we'll just have to work with what I have here. So there, now I'm in good shape. Okay, so we're on the statistics page and we're going to talk about line 1 and acute discharges. That's patients that needed inpatient care. They stayed in the bed overnight. And I'm going to try to move the cursor over to this number. So can you see the cursor at the number 125? That's what the year-to-date discharges were for the first 4 months.
We can.
Okay, so the reason why I'm starting there is you compare that to the 93 budget. That's 34% as a percentage higher than budget. That's a big percentage, 34% higher. And then you go over to the far right, see what we had last year, that 84 acute discharges represents the first 4 months of this year that were 48% higher than last year. in terms of how many patients got admitted to the inpatient unit. So 48% increase on our inpatient business this current year compared to last year has been a real positive from a financial perspective. The other corresponding number that goes along with that is how long did these people stay as an average length of stay, which is line 15. And the current number for this year, you can see the 4.2 average days, a little bit over 4 days they stayed. A year ago, that number was much longer lengths of stay of 5.9. So apparently we didn't get many admissions last year, but the people that got admitted were a lot sicker and stayed a lot longer. And Mark, does that make sense to you that a year ago it was that the patients we're getting now aren't quite as severe?
I don't, maybe for the month of October, yes, but some of the problems with that we're seeing now is the length of stay for the COVID admissions. If they get that remdesivir treatment and therapy, that's a 5-day regimen. And critical access hospitals are kind of bound to a 4-day
Right.
length of stay problem. So we're up against a little bit of a wall there,
Sure.
but
Okay.
we do a good job turning them around now. So
The reason why I'm thinking that the patients don't seem to be, we have another way to measure that on line 46 called case mix index. And that's the coders and medical records go through the process of putting information in on each patient on the severity and intensity of the service that's performed. The higher the number, the more severe the patient was. And you can see the number for the first 4 months of this current year, 1.08 compared to last year, 1.20, shows that it's a little less severe patient, which goes along with the fact that our length of stay also was lower. So those are just kind of two comparisons that I look at when I try to figure out what's going on as it relates to our client base. The next item that I want to make general reference to is a big fat 0 in a category that we normally have business, and that's outpatient scopes. And Tim may have informed you a couple months ago how the doctors were temporarily not coming in anymore to do the GI cases. And you can see, so that's hurt us a little bit. You can see the year-to-date at 56 compared to the budget of 136. We're not doing the scopes like we did. So that has hurt our outpatient revenues a little bit. I looked at the numbers, and it's about only 191,000 year-to-date on revenues, and the budget is 558. So about 400,000 less on revenues because the doctors have temporarily not coming out to do the GI scopes for right now. And I'm sure when Tim gets back, he'll give you an update. We're expecting that to get reinstated as soon as possible. Any questions on that? The last item that continues to be positive is line item 32, ER visits. And you can see that number 2564 compared to 2449. That represents about a 5% favorable variance on ED visits. And it's even a bigger variance when you compare it to last year, which was 2167. So ED is busier, more patients are being admitted. They're staying less time, and don't have the benefit of having a GI lab working right now. So those are some of the trends going on with our patient activity. Any questions on that? So I figured out, I'm really happy with myself. I figured out a quick way to jump around the screen. I'm going to go to page 3. And now we're back near the beginning again, which is the executive summary to page 2B. I guess on yours, it would be page 8. And I wanted to just point out how the graphs, these 3 graphs here that are related to volumes, ER visits, you can see the favorable trend going up from 72 to 73 on ED. The inpatient acute going the right direction, higher compared to budget. And the third one is the overall net income being much better due to the higher volumes. So those three graphs kind of go consistent with what we've talked about. The next,
So, skilled nursing
Yes.
seems to be going down.
yeah, until we get, now that we've cleared the hurdle of being able to readmit with the COVID issues, I don't know. Mark, is there anything new on how skilled is it likely that skilled is going to start picking up again?
We have admitted 5 or 6 new patients, but unfortunately, they seem to be just holding steady by attrition.
I see.
Patients are being admitted under hospice, and by the nature of that process, it seems like every time we admit some, we lose some. So it's kind of a catch-22.
Do we have any kind of program or any kind of way to maybe create more business or make something happen other than just wait until somebody knocks on the door?
No, we're going out and we're assessing other facilities to see who's got patients available. Our Tracy Mari and Sally are looking for appropriate cases for us. So yeah, no, we're pounding the sand to try to get some admissions. We hadn't been for quite some time because we weren't able to admit people. But now that we're back on the good graces, we can certainly, like I said, we just admitted 5, so it's a process.
Thanks, Mark.
So I have another piece of good news. We talk about days of cash on hand. You can see this graph here. There's 2 different subcategories, short-term and all sources. The all sources is something I want to just briefly touch on because it's part of what I do when I do strategic financial planning, because we really have the luxury of having all our cash assets available for big projects like the $19 million new hospital that we have to analyze whether or not how much we can afford to use of that money to keep a safe level of reserves. And the luxury we have is looking at the gap here between the light blue bar of 91.12 to what is average for other hospitals in the 60s and 70s. Just to let you know, that gap there from 91 down to the 60s is about $8 million more we have in the bank than the average hospital adjusted for size. So that's why we can even consider doing such a large project without borrowing, because of the benefit of what Chet and all you guys have done before I got here to build up your reserves. The other piece of good news is I expect this number to go up by about 5 million by the end of this year. The reason why it's low this time of the year is because we have a timing issue as it relates to when IGT payments come in. And usually the first quarter and the first few months of every new fiscal year, we don't get much in. It's less than 5% of the total amount we expect for the whole year has come in on IGT money. After all that comes in by the end of the year, this number is likely to be more like 105 days of cash, not 91. So that'll even build that gap a little bit higher. That will give us some confidence that we have the ability to use some of that money to make investments in the hospital. So I just wanted to kind of show it to you in that context so that you could kind of see why we're doing what we're doing and why we can support it to the community, because of the way the organization was managed in the past that put us in this position where we have excess cash available.
Dave, does that affect whenever we don't pay our bills There for a while, Chet would like to stretch him out as long as he could. If he didn't have to pay for 3 or 4 or 5 months, he wouldn't pay. Just, if he could do it. Is that to make it look better? Because I mean, it doesn't, at the end of the day, it don't make any difference.
At the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference. If I was to guess the way Chet thinks, because I'm a CFO, I understand how CFOs think. You want to create a mindset in the organization is to try to be as stingy as possible and not to spend money unless you absolutely have to. And it's more of a mindset issue. But you're right. By not paying bills right away doesn't really change how much you're going to have. You have to pay the bill eventually.
Yeah, well, normally, being in business, if you're gonna have to wait 90 days, you build that in, so you pay more for
Yeah.
what you're getting as a
Yeah,
rule.
There's a lot of contracts that force us to pay within a certain number of days, net 30 or whatever. And if you don't pay that, you end up having to pay more. So I'm in total agreement of maybe deviating a little bit from the way Chet wanted to do that, because as long as we've got the money, we're better off getting those bills paid as fast as we can, so we don't have to overpay. However, where I stop short is when Barbara's got a question and there seems to be a lack of documentation that the vendor even deserves to get paid. I don't want to be making those payments too quickly.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to move on unless anybody has any questions on this page. I'm going to go to the balance sheet. So we're going to go to page 10 on the normal report, page 3 in the upper corner. And I want to make reference to these top percentages that I've added to the report. I made brief message on this before. What these percentages compare is the line item 4 to line item 2. How much of our receivables do we expect to collect? And it's obviously an important number because we have close to $30 million of receivables, and we have to estimate how much of that we could collect based on our history of how much we've been able to collect on recent payments. The bad news is I had to bring that number down from 23% down to 20.9% based on my most recent updated analysis of claims that got paid in the last several months. So I'm a little concerned about that. Oftentimes, this is a short period of time. Those numbers can change back quickly. It may be, in fact, the case that the insurance companies are intentionally holding back on some of the large payments and requiring more documentation before they pay those. And then eventually those averages start coming back to where we expect them to come closer to the 22, 23%. So in the absence of that, what I have to do on when we book the allowance reserves, this line item 3, that number has to go up. We have to expect that there's going to be more write-offs until we can prove to ourselves that we can collect a higher percentage. So we want to be careful to make sure that this number 4 stays conservative, that we don't overstate how much we expect to collect off our gross AR.
Well, we had a 7.5% increase last year, right?
Yes, and rarely does the Medicare or the third-party payers say, okay, you increased your rate 7.5%. We're going to give you 7.5% more in your payment. So that causes the write-off percentage to go up.
But a few insurance companies, we might have got a little bit more money from them.
Exactly. So that's why you do it. It still adds to the bottom line because you obviously need to reflect your charges based on costs. For example, we're giving a 2.5% raise to our employees at the end of this month. That's a cost that needs to get passed on to the consumer or the insurance companies. So
that just looks awful red.
it's a big red number. The next item I wanted to talk about was line 19. Line 19, you can see has another big red number, 997. What Barbara had to do is move some money out of some of our accounts to do an IGT matching. Now you put up money at the beginning and then you get that money and then almost double back when you finally get your check, which will happen in May or June of this year. So what happened is, so there's $1 million of funds that we have sitting out there to be matched. I call it funds being held by the state. It goes to Sacramento for IGT matching. So we had to temporarily take that money out of this account, which had 5.8 million. Now it's down to 4.8 for that IGT matching type of issue. And you want to know where that shows up? It shows up on line 6 as other receivables. You see, that's a similar amount of increase of about $1 million because it's still an asset. It's still our money, but it's not cash anymore. It's temporarily considered an other receivable until we get that IGT money back.
Okay, Dave, while you're there on the IGT, you have, I think, mentioned that they might be slimming down a little bit in the future on what they reimburse us, which is, we get a pretty good reimbursement. Do you think it's going to be reduced some, or?
Yeah, yes, good question. I'm in the process of going through each one of the separate IGTs. Some of them are going to be reduced, some of them are okay. And I'm in the process of quantifying exactly how many dollars less we should expect at least this year than what we've gotten last year. And it's about 2.5–3 million less this year. There's a good chance that the amounts that we get the following year will be maybe only $500,000 or so less than what we got 2 years ago. So most of that should come back. Part of it was due to the state changing their fiscal years and only doing a 6-month IGT instead of a 12-month IGT. That was a couple $1 million right there. The rest of them seem to be pretty good going forward. We've got some insurances from Kern that the one IGT that used to go to another hospital that we will have an opportunity to be able to get those because of there's not as many hospitals participating. So in some respects, there may be increases in IGTs, but we're going to have to keep a close eye on it, because if we're going to be successful in having positive cash flow every year to pay for this new building, we're going to need to see that those IGTs are going to stay in place, because that's a big part of how all the hospitals, district hospitals throughout the state have survived, is through these supplemental payments, which pretty much do what they should do anyway by paying hospitals the difference between what our costs are and what they pay in normal Medicaid payments is way less than what costs are. So they try to make it up for it with IGTs and other supplemental payments, and they need to continue to do that. Otherwise, it's difficult for any hospital to stay open. And I think the state has learned that over the years, that this is a necessary part of operations, especially for district hospitals. That the nice part about it from the state level is it's a federal matching, so it doesn't have to come out of the state budgets. It comes out of the federal budgets.
So thank you so much for that.
You bet. So the last item I was going to refer to on this sheet is the line item. Actually, I'm going to go to the next page on liabilities, and we're going to talk about this line item 20. This HHS money was 4.5, Medicare was 1.5, and that's why we got 6 million on the books. So what we talked about with this success we had in submitting that report last month is there's a good chance that 6 million number is going to go down to 1.5 million, and we'll be able to take that off the liabilities and be able to have that money to spend on other projects. So that's good news, because it would have obviously been a big problem with our cash position if we would have had to pay back some of that or much of that money. So we will be glad to get that off the books as a liability in the near term. The other thing I continue to work on, which is also positive news, is the line item 10. You can see how at the, when I first came on board, Chet had almost 14 million out there the end of last year for what he says we owe third-party payers. I'm looking at those numbers all the time, and when I have 100% confidence that they're not legitimate liabilities, we take them off the books, and you can see how that number now has gone down to 10 million. So we're going to continue to look at that and continue to bring those numbers down to what they should be. He's right in being careful not to assume anything until you're absolutely sure. And so we're also being careful with that. But at the same time, we want to be able to present accurate financials. So I want to continue to keep you informed on how that's going. So the next page is your P&L. And we talked about most of this. The only things I want to make reference to is on the expense side, line 28, the variance of 160,000 less expenses than budget for the month. Now, I quantified it. There's about 90,000 of that 160, which was based on some accrual, year-to-date accrual adjustments that from prior months Barbara fixed on fringe benefits. You can see that number is a lot less than budget because she had moved a few items that were overstated in prior months. And now we've got a more accurate year-to-date picture of fringe benefits. Similarly, we had some credits on line 21, repairs and maintenance. So the variance of the 79,000 and the variance of the 11,000 represent 90,000 of that 160. But we would still have a less than actual expenses compared to budget for the month. Even with that 90,000, still be about 70,000 less than budget in a month where we had volumes being higher than budget. So those are all good combinations of having higher revenues and lower expenses. Bottom line for the month going down, it shows 166,000 better than budget for net surplus for the month of October. Going to the year-to-date picture after 4 months. So the number that jumps out at me is line item 11. Net patient revenue is how much that comes into the organization in terms of cash and payments for services rendered. So that is one way you can, in a simplified way, define what growth is. When you have the net patient revenue increasing, your organization is growing, you have more money coming in. Well, you look at it from year to year. So what we do is we look at this first column, which is the year-to-date actual, and we go way over to the far right, which is where we were at a year ago after the first 4 months. And you can see that's about $2.2 million better, 11.8 million compared to 9.6 in terms of net patient revenue. Now, just a little bit of caveat on that. Out of the 2.2 million, there's a little slightly over $1 million of this year-to-date number was an adjustment from prior year understated net patient revenue. When we talked about moving some of that third-party payer out of the balance sheet, off the liabilities, that improves the net patient revenue. So out of the 2.2 million improvement, maybe about $1 million of it is prior year, but we still have over $1 million of it, which is based on the increased patient activity and payments coming in. So that's what I see. And then year to date, our bottom line picture shows about a 1.4 million favorable variance for the first 4 months. You can see a year ago, we were actually slightly in the red. So a nice change in terms of how we're starting out this fiscal year in the positive for the first quarter and a little over a quarter of business. Going to this trend, this 13-month trend report is deductions from revenue percentage is kind of a repeat of what we said, how our collection percentage is getting worse. So if you're collecting less percentage, that means your deductions are going to start increasing. And you can see for the month of November, that number went up to a 72% write-off percentage. A month ago, it was only 67. So we're trying to accurately depict how we're doing in terms of collecting money so we don't overstate our bottom line by looking at future projections of what we actually will get paid on the gross charges. And right now, our percentage write-off, at least for the month of October, was estimated at 72%. Lastly, the final thing I wanted to point out is on page 11, the ratios. When you look at the very bottom, when you compare how we're doing on a volume adjusted basis on money coming in, which is net revenue, line 31, you want that number to be higher the better. And in fact, our number 12,457 is better than other hospitals' numbers or what we had in prior years. So that's a good thing that our revenue per adjusted discharge is up, is higher. And it's also favorable that our operating expenses per adjusted discharge is lower. It went from 11,078 to 10,949. So that's a good combination of good financial performance so far for the first 4 months. And I kind of went fast and I didn't stop and ask if there were any questions on any page. So you have a right to have me go back to any of those pages. I apologize. Or if you have any other general questions about how things are going.
Do you have a question, Gene?
Yes, the one thing you were talking about on the cost of the project with with the changes that have been taking place and the changes in the economy since we started that master plan back in 19 and made change after change after change. Apparently the place where you get the cost from, do you have is Bob Easterday still there? No, he's gone.
I've got a meeting set up with Bob. We're going to start meeting on a weekly basis because those are the things I want to flesh out in terms of where our assumptions, if they're still accurate, how much inflation, do we have to assume with this project? How much of it is built in when we put in the contingencies and those kind of things? Obviously, if the number is going to be a lot higher than $19 million, we need to know that now.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Now you said flush out. What's the cost? Apparently, Bob submits that to a Cummings or a company.
Number one, please dial extension 337.
And what would be the cost of them updating that? Because you're right. I mean, you're more right than I am for sure. You're really on top of it.
We really want to stay on top of it, and we need to get some outside opinions on what's going on with construction costs. Obviously, until you bid out a project and you get the final bids in, you don't really know how much things are going up, and they do change from time to time. So we want to be careful not to get overly concerned. There are some theories out there that the economy is going to start slowing down a little bit, that all this heating up maybe is not going to continue much longer, and maybe we'll have a little bit of a slowdown that'll cause prices to start moderating again. But it's certainly something this board is going to have to keep in the back of our mind as we move forward in terms of contingencies. What do we do if inflation goes up by a certain amount higher than what we were expecting?
Or the cost of material has gone up drastically.
Absolutely.
And so it's totally changed from what it was when we started. And so I was sort of asking, if we did get a better gauge on it, what would be the expense of going to a professional that does that? Like, was it Cummings? Is that what they said it was?
I will talk to Bob about Mr. Cummings. I don't know enough about what Mr. Cummings does, but it certainly doesn't hurt to get some outside help on this kind of thing, so we get some independent opinions on what we can expect.
Well, just a good idea or a better idea than where we're at.
Absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, though, I think it still should be full steam ahead, and we need to continue to give our people all the resources they need to keep that project moving along. Obviously, the faster we get through it, the less likely we're going to be subject to more and more changes with the inflation and those kind of things. So we still want to keep moving that project forward as fast as we can.
Now, I'm not sure if this is finance. That what we did with Tim giving them that 750,000 or almost 800,000, whatever it is.
Yeah, that shows up as an asset on the books because it's an insurance plan that's owned by the district. And you know, obviously a lot has to happen for you know, everything to go according to the way that plan is written out. So in the meantime, it's still considered on our books as an asset.
My question is, do I understand we're purchasing that for him, but there's contingencies on why we're doing it. He's to get zero income other than that for the next 7 years. Do we have a contract? Does that need to go through the contract, through finance? I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's a legal question. I'm just gonna kind of defer
Okay,
to.
then I'd like to move it to the board for the board meeting. Heidi, can we put that question on there?
What was your question again, Jean?
Do we have a signed contract? He's agreed that he will get zero income above what we gave him, the $750,000 or $800,000 for the next 7 years. And he won't accept anything other than that for increases.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
I do.
There's gotta be a signed contract, because otherwise he could say, well, I don't remember saying that. Not that Tim would do that.
Yeah, I think you
There
can
has to be a
legally
contract.
get that wrapped up with a little bit tighter language somewhere to make everyone feel comfortable that they're on the same page.
Not too loose a contract. It is what it is, and it says what he said. So thank you, Dave.
You bet. So my general report today, the basics of how we're doing is still very positive, and I'm glad to be on board. And I just am asking the board to give me enough time. It took Chet a lot of years for him to know as much as he knew about the organization. It's going to take me a little bit of time to get up to speed. So I'm instead of giving reports that I'm not sure about, I'm wanting to take extra time to really make sure I have the accurate numbers.
Dave, it sounds like you're doing an awesome job so far. It looks
Thank you.
really good.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? That's my report, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Anybody have any other questions for him? No? Okay, Barbara, vendor aging report.
There was a vendor aging report. Jean requested a full vendor aging, which is what is here. Does anybody have any questions on it?
Yeah, is it going to be on the screen? I've only got one screen. I don't have any paper. Could you briefly just tell us the one that's over 30 days, why it is, and if there's any additional interest like Dave was talking about, if there's a penalty, just roughly what you know, which you pretty much know every one of them off the top of your head. I'm talking about the older ones. I know there's a few there. Greenbrow, I thought we paid those. We went over that at the last meeting.
We paid off the oldest ones and we're still paying. they keep coming in, so we keep paying.
And we're keep getting, but where we're submitting the bills, they're coming through finance, justifying it, right? That was the agreement. And
They're coming from Tim and through Bob. So I
that
don't know.
looks like, that's quite a bit of money.
Well, aren't they going through, I thought they were going through board planning. We haven't been bringing their invoices always to finance, except when you've requested something.
Oh, no, every one of their bills goes to finance. And Bob explains what it is and why we're paying it. It was so messed up before, and they said, well, we owe it because we owe it. It wasn't a pretty picture.
Dave, I think you're on mute.
Dave?
Okay, what I want to do for Barbara's benefit is to create a template for her that there's no surprises when we get an invoice from the architect. It's something we expected because of what had transpired in the recent past that caused us to ask for certain extra work to be done in certain areas. And then when she gets the invoice, it won't be any surprise.
No, the agreement was, Dave, that Bob Easterday brings the invoice in, explains what it is.
Yep,
Whenever we approved that, that's
Yes.
the way it was approved.
exactly. So we need to be, it shouldn't ever be a surprise when Barbara gets an invoice from the architect. We need to know, we need to have already expected it because that was an action the board took.
And we need to bring it into finance to make sure it's in line with the way we're doing it. Because
Exactly.
it gets out of hand or out of shape over a period of time, gets confusing.
So that's what we want to tighten down. I don't like Barbara being confused when she gets an invoice. That should be something, we want to minimize surprises.
Yeah, so does the finance committee wants to minimize surprises too. And that's been a problem with that, with at any rate.
Yeah, so I'm making it my priority to work a lot closer with Bob and the architect so that we really know exactly what's going on at all times.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So, Jean, do you still want Barbara to go through that or?
Well, just she can't put it on the screen apparently.
No, we
don't
weren't
have it.
prepared for that.
Well, I just wondered her roughly, some of them, there's quite a few over 30 days and some a little more. Just briefly, I
Some of
can't
them
see.
Registries will always tail out. The biggest ones that we have that are probably pushing the 60-day are the registries.
And why is it, can you tell why they're, I don't understand what you do. So if you could tell us why they're where they are.
Try to make sure that there's enough money to pay for what we need to pay for at the time. If the registries are still working with us and not complaining, then we may have to spend more money on supplies for some reason. It all depends upon what's happening throughout the facility at the time.
So they're not building anything in, if we can just drag them out and not pay any extra. And when they contract with us, they don't build in because we're gonna be slow payers?
No. They give us an
Dave?
agreement for what they're going to charge us for the time that they supply the employees, and that's what we pay.
Normally, whenever you do business, and somebody's gonna be 3 months to 6 months out, like some government contracts, you charge more to compensate for them doing that. And that's not the case with the ones we're dealing with, is what I'm asking.
I don't make those contracts. I don't know if they build in a higher rate.
Dave, do you have any input in that? You're on mute.
You're correct in identifying the fact that the way some contracts are written, we have to pay penalties when we don't pay within a certain amount of time. With the registry companies, my guess is they probably build in higher rates, assuming that it's going to take them longer to get paid. So that might be a way in the future I can negotiate these rates down to say, hey, look, I'm willing to pay you net 20 days or something if you can lower my fees by 10% or something.
That'd be very cool.
So
Very,
that,
very
you know, that's probably a good idea for us to go down that path. If they think they're going to get their money faster, maybe they're willing to charge us less.
And we can pay it to them faster. We got some money sitting there doing
We've got the money. If we, you know, if we wanted to take it out of certain accounts, if it's going to save us money in the long term.
Yeah, not out of my account though. Thank you, Dave. And Barbara.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Do you want her to go through any more or?
No, I think right now, I think Dave is just right on top. He seems like we might have hired a good guy. I don't know if it was by mistake or not, but.
Okay, well, thank you, Dave and Barbara.
Thank you.
We don't have any old business listed, so going to G for new business. Those are the contract review and renewals. After I reviewed them, I didn't have any questions. Jean, did you review them?
Yeah, I looked at them. That one thing, that organization that Tim goes to, the dues for it, how much are those, Barbara?
There's an annual amount there. That's what it is annually. And then we pay it monthly though.
How much is it?
21,000.
21,000 annually?
Yes.
Is it worth it?
To him, probably.
Mark, you're.
Oh, yeah, they are. It is well worth it. They do a lot of advocacy for the legislation when things are, they do a really good job up in Sacramento for us.
When we went away from ACHD, this is one of the ones that we elected to stay with because he thought that they were doing more for us than some of the other agencies.
Do they do some stuff for board members to help educate us, to make us look smarter?
That's a Tim question.
Yeah, I don't need to look smarter. I just need to be smarter.
Okay. That, like you said, that'd be a Tim question.
Okay.
Okay, that was the only one that I had a question, Barbara. Thank you.
Okay, there is one on the list that will be coming off because under the understanding that it will not be continuing, and that's on Dr. Mongar, and that's as the medical director of the SNF. So Tim informed me that that one will be coming off. Just for your information.
And it'd be coming off because we're no longer going to be contracted with that doctor?
With the shuffle with Dr. Lopez and Dr. Mongar working in the clinic, they're kind of doing some restructuring, but
Okay.
continuing with the nursing.
Okay.
But those contracts, as they're rewritten, they will come back to the board through finance committee for approval individually as contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then, okay, that's number one. Number two, Mark, capital expenditure request.
Yeah, so anyway, the most of the information is there in the CER, but Dr. Gross went to a seminar in San Francisco to get the latest treatments and therapies with COVID related conditions and, you know, pre-intubation, pre-ICU level care. He came across a product called the Airvo. It's not a ventilator, but it's a warm, moist air, high flow oxygen, very controlled amount of oxygen concentration that RT is has developed, that, the developers have, and they say that this is the preferred therapy prior to intubating someone, that along with vapotherm, and then BiPAP, and then intubation. So there's a step. We try to prevent intubating patients who have COVID because getting them off those ventilators is very difficult. This kind of would help us not have to transfer patients, so many patients. We could get them turned around and actually take care of them right here in the hospital. So these are revenue producing items. We're going to buy 2 of them. The original quote we got was for 3, but I think with our volume of COVID related and COPD related patients, because these do work with COPD as well, these kind of items, we can have 1 in the ER and 1 on acute care. And I think that they'll be very beneficial. If you can see on the quote, it says that the vapotherm unit, a single unit, is $7,238. These units are $4,143. So 2 of those units is about $8,286. They are revenue generating items where we can charge for that service. So we're asking for 2 of those.
Catherine, can we send that to consent?
Yes, so Heidi, if you could put that on consent, my only question would be, is 3 better than 2? I mean, with not knowing what's coming.
The fact that we have only 2 real rooms and 1 respiratory therapist to manage those items, I don't know that having 3 of them at one time I think that 3rd patient probably should be transferred from our facility based on the lack of an intensive care unit. That would be my only recommendation.
Okay, just wondering, because
if you want to get 3, we can certainly get 3.
I'm just,
Make
you just
The request
never
is
know
for
with the
2.
way things are changing. So, okay,
Right, yeah,
2's good. So yes, Heidi, thank you for putting that on the consent.
Mhm.
And so it looks like that is all we have.
Well, is it time, Catherine? Do I have time to give Dave a hard time?
No, Jean,
Okay, all right,
I'm sorry, but
okay.
he's been doing too good of a job and helping Barbara. So no, you don't get it. Sorry.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. Feel better. All right. I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody, for all your input.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dave.
Bye, guys.